Really looking forward to this conversation because I have the pleasure of being on a stage with these two. So,
It's a mutual pleasure.
right. So the idea, I want to get right to it. I think that there's a huge opportunity having a utility and then having an automotive manufacturer. Two perspectives that I think, if we think about the intersection of how we accelerate EV adoption, how we begin to think about mobility, it's going to take efforts from both of the sectors that you all represent to really accelerate this in a real way. So starting with that, I want to really, kind of zero in on this. What is the role, or what should OEMs or manufacturers be doing, as well as what should utilities be doing to accelerate EV adoption? Real easy question.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good morning. I think it's a really transitional time where we're trying to get people who have grown up with this idea of fueling a vehicle from full to empty and back to full again, every 2 weeks or every week they stop at the gas station for a 15-minute fill up that does their day. And we're trying to change that understanding of how you use an electric vehicle compared to how you use a gas vehicle. The people that charge at home, and I know that not everybody can, but the people that charge at home will just stick the thing on charge when they go in at night, and they wake up every morning to a full tank, and they'll never think about that again. We still get people saying, well, I go 300-mile journeys and so on, it can be done. I think that the role for us is to allow and give confidence to our current buyers, some of whom have been buying cars for 50 years now. The idea that they can change their habits, and it's not about, well, I got to find a gas station. It's about, well, I'll plug this thing in when I go home at night. It's more like your phone than your old car.
Hey everyone, good to see you again, Terry. Who is visiting Austin? Who's out of town? So first of all, I want to welcome you to Austin. I hope you enjoy not only this beautiful facility here, but the rest Austin has to offer. Also, as we talk about our programs, the smart people behind all those programs is the Austin Energy staff that's represented here. Could I get the Austin Energy folks to stand up, recognize yourself? So a lot of us are wearing these shirts, electric greater than gas, but I'm gonna tell you before this panel's over how you can get your own electric greater than gas shirt. Sound fair? All right, but you gotta listen, because there might be a trick in there, but you can walk home with one of these almost guaranteed after this panel is done. To answer the question, what can utilities do to promote transportation electrification? I would say the short answer is anything and everything. So I would say kind of unique about the Austin Energy EV team. One, we're a relatively mature team for our industry, 10 years. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. We have over 28 active initiatives, and we cover a spectrum. So our strategy is to be very comprehensive, holistic, and in some ways not just stay in the lane, but just look at barriers wherever they exist. So I talk to utilities all the time. And utilities, a lot of them are just getting into this game, if you will, are focusing on infrastructure. And that's definitely a very strong play for utilities. It's what we do, public infrastructure as well as home infrastructure. But our 5-pillar strategy has 4 other areas that we think are equally important to overall have an effective city electrification plan. So we talked about infrastructure. 2 is marketing and outreach, having a vision. And what I see a lot of utilities, I recommend to utilities, what can they do, is if you don't take a leadership position now, you're already too late, you're not going to be invited to key decisions that are going to impact you. So the adage, you're either on the table or at the table, is really true in the EV world and how utilities. 3rd is fleet electrification. We have active fleet projects with our local transit authority, our own city fleets. That also includes new mobility. So there was a lot of talk about gig economy electrification as well earlier. Equity and affordability has to be a cornerstone to everything you do as utility. And then lastly, grid modernization, what we do. Vehicle to grid was talked earlier. We have active vehicle to grid projects. We have active time of use and off-peak charging projects. How are we going to integrate these massive battery packs on wheels safely and reliably onto the grid?
All of that is really spot on. I think that one of the things that we're experiencing that we have to acknowledge today is that we're experiencing 100+ years of habit with fossil fuel. And so as we think through what that looks like and what this paradigm shift is going to be, and as we move from early adopters to mass majority, there's going to be some really hard questions that have to be answered. And so one of the next areas that I want to really take a dive into is that and this is directly to you, Michael, from an OEM perspective, how are OEMs positioned to produce internal combustion engine vehicles and at the same time produce full battery electric vehicles in that same paradigm? And how are we going to think about that as we move forward in this ecosystem?
Right. I think you're all probably aware of the word supply chain right now. That seems to be a word on everybody's lips because you can't get the coffee you want and the shelves are empty and they're all out Long Beach Harbor somewhere. So that the automotive industry has grown into this global supply chain business. It's just in time, everything comes to you just as you need it, goes on the car and goes out of the door. But the way we make EVs is different, or it should be. So we have traditional gasoline vehicles, we have these hybrid vehicles right now that can operate as electric or gasoline, and then we have full battery electric. The full battery electrics are made in a different way. But that's really only maybe 15, 20% of the entire supply chain there. You still need the workers to come in, screw them together. They still have to go down a line. They still have to come off the end. You still need a factory with restrooms where people can wash their hands and parking and all that stuff. And then you need a delivery mechanism, the logistics of that, to get those vehicles to customers. So that's all the same. The bit that changes is how you make them. Battery electric vehicles go together differently. They typically have a platform. I think you're an expert in platform manufacturing. They go together differently. They can't run down typically the same line. So the challenge for a manufacturer is to balance production. You have your gasoline vehicles coming through, you have your battery electric vehicles coming through. When everything's on the same line, you can make more of one car or less of the other and it all balances out. Can't do that so much with EVs. So when you commit, you commit. And that's why you're seeing the big players now, like my company, we're Kia, we're part of the world's third biggest car company. You don't always know that. But between us and our partners at Hyundai and Genesis and so on, we're a big deal. And so we're committing to EVs now, which means we're making EV production lines. Once we're in the game and once the other big OEMs are in the game of battery electric, it's happening. There's no stopping the train at this point. And I think sometimes we look at it like a train. We see it leaving the station at 2-3 miles an hour. Like, well, that's not going very fast. The momentum on that train is already there. So when you see a train leave the station at 2 miles an hour, you're not stopping it. You're not stopping a train at 2 miles an hour. Within a minute, it'll be in 60 miles an hour. And that's where we are with EVs right now on the OEM side. It's nice to see the startups coming in. We like it. Startups give a great credibility to the industry. They make people interested. Some small company or other had an IPO the other day. It's good. It keeps the conversation going. But the big people are in town now. So we'll see what happens there.
Which leads to the other side of that equation, Carl. You all have been very forward-leaning at Austin Energy, but obviously we know that there are a number of utilities across country that have just thought about this through the traditional lens of energy generation, energy transmission, haven't really thought about electrification through the lens of resiliency, opportunity, moving kilowatts. What do you think it's going to take for the industry to begin to pivot and begin to really embrace this new opportunity that's in front of them?
Well, I'm already seeing that rapidly. I'm seeing major players making shifts. Even when you look at Shell Oils, now Shell Energy, to refocus on, how are we moving into the future? And I'm seeing utilities doing the same thing. So the good news as far as even the U.S. grid or overall, the majority of new capacity is coming from carbon-free generation source. So every year it's getting better and better. And also utilities also see this as what a lot of utility people call load growth. And what I don't like about the term load growth for EVs, it implies more of the same. But electrification is a completely different type of load for utilities because the load curve is completely different. So as an industry, we are just in time. We generate turbines typically when you turn on a light, and Austin Energy is providing the power you see around here today. So anyone who plugged in their phone or enjoyed the lights or this microphone, came as part of a Austin Energy customer. But the load growth with EVs, one is you look at a 24-hour cycle. There's a lot more done at night. There's also customers much more willing to shift load, which we've discovered in our time of use as well as demand response EV pilots versus traditional shifting of load on air conditioning. And then you don't have the seasonal spikes. We spend billions of dollars in Texas, billions and billions, around a few hours during summer peaks, summer months. So you have all this excess potential transmission distribution capacity when EVs are charging on a cool day, a warm day, a hot day. So it is what I refer to, this transportation electrification is spice on a rib. It adds high value to something that you've already invested in, but it's a lot lower cost because you're leveraging existing heavy infrastructure investments that you already put in because the load profile is different. So it's very new profitable revenue. And then also, since a lot of happens at night in the residential sector, we have a potential for overcapacity of wind here on the ERCOT market. We have a lot of wind that blows at night, which doesn't really have a market for in some cases. That's why you might see the trading prices of wind energy go to zero or even a little negative due to how the subsidies work. EVs are a great potential candidate to soak up all that extra load.
One of the things that we really want to zero in on is that it's multimodal electrification. Outside, if you're taking a look around, it's e-bikes, it's scooters, it's light-duty passenger vehicles, heavy-duty freight. All of these things are going to play a role in this. One of the things that is critically important is how do we communicate this change to consumers? I'm going to go back to you really quickly, Carl. I think that you all have done a pretty good job of this without question, but how do we begin to communicate this disruption to consumers in a way that is not overly technical, that provides an easier road to accelerating EV adoption? And also, Michael, I want you to chime in on that from an OEM perspective as well.
Well, this is also where I'm going to tell you how to get your free electric greater than gas t-shirt. To your point is, that one of the 5 pillars is marketing and outreach. And to really understand keeping your message simple and your program simple. So we have a mascot who's an intern on our team, Stevie, the EV-loving T-Rex, a hashtag love Stevie. And that's how you get your shirt. If you visit our booth and you say, Stevie sent me, our staff is going to give you one of these. Not too bad, huh?
He was here last time we were together.
Pardon me?
He was over there last time we were
Yeah,
here.
and I'm going to tell a story about Michael very quickly here. So last night, when we were at dinner, he's like, yeah, I was at Circuit of the Americas, and there's this Austin Energy guy, and he was really cool. Maybe you know him. I'm like, well, I started, yeah, that was me. And he's like, no, I don't think so, but he was cool. He really knew his stuff. I'm like, so I brought
It's
photographic evidence of us
COVID-
together
COVID's
on
been
this
hard on
stage.
everybody.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard Michael Snout. He said COVID's hard on everyone. Yes, it's been very hard. Yes, I was such a young face 18 months ago. But one is to, put things simple. So our pricing strategy we have 1,200 plus public charging ports. There's a lot of talk about, there's these demand charges and these line items and idling and all these complexities. Ours is all you can use $417 a month. That's it. People can understand that. And it's backed by Green Choice, which promotes West Texas wind. And to keep it simple. And the other thing we learned, so we have, those Google placement ads, and people search and what hits the buyer's guide. So that's another thing I'm going to point you to for simplicity. We have a buyer's guide, ev.austinenergy.com, which now has, what we're at to, about 15 dealerships who have aggregated all their EVs into one platform. And very simple of here's the programs, here's the state programs, local, and then here's the color and the make of car available on that lot at this dealership today. So as a real-time inventory, which is also key for something like that. But what we found is driving, and then we get 10,000 unique visitors per month to the buyer's guide. That's fantastic. For a sales funnel that registers 350 EVs a month, you have 10,000 unique, you're pushing the market there. And what we found from our Google search engine, even the term electric vehicle, that's an industry term. Our customers, in the top 5 things they look for, electric vehicles isn't one of them. You want to take a guess what the #1 search is to land on a buyer's guide? And I'll tell you, it's not electric vehicles. That's our term. That's not what customers say. Someone said solar? What? I thought I heard it. Who was that? Yeah, electric car. Anyone guess the #2 search term? Electric cars, plural. So so as a utility, we can either take here's what a lot of utilities do that I think is a mistake. As an industry, utilities aren't great at marketing. I think our team is wonderfully and great, but as an industry, we're not. We're about reliability and traditional engineering. But what most utilities do, they say, here's all our terms that we know about, KW, KWH, demand charges, electric vehicles, et cetera, and we're going to do outreach and teach you our language. So we're going to educate you on how we speak. I think that's ridiculous. I think utilities should educate themselves how their customers speak, and then you change your programs and your wording and your language to reflect how your customers are looking at that. So that's how I do that. Oh, we got an applause note for that.
You know, people will do anything for a T-shirt.
I think I kind of want to drop a mic and leave the stage on you, Michael.
Yeah, we look at the way consumers behave, and in the end, they get smart. There are people who will always pay for convenience. So people will pay, way higher rates than they should for anything in their lives if it's easy. But eventually, consumers get smart. But the thing we have to think about in the short term is how smart the charging providers are going to be. So they'll be hitting demand charges. There'll be variable prices day after day. You'll go to the same pump, plug in, and it'll cost you 3 times as much, because you did it at 4 p.m. instead of 4:30 p.m. So consumers eventually will learn that behavior. And I think once they start to do that, the market will settle down a little bit. We're clearly going to get into this disruptive stage of people not understanding how it all works and then finding themselves with a huge bill for the car they just charged up because they did it at a peak time rather than coming back at 8 o'clock. Some people will, some people won't. Do you know why we call them electric vehicles, by the way? Does anybody know why we don't say electric cars? Anybody know? So we have this, trucks. We have this weird distinction in the industry. It's a legal term. A car is anything up to, I forget the floor weight on it now, but there are other criteria in there too. And we have SUVs and cars. And they live by different rules. You can do different rules for SUVs than you can for cars. You have different fuel economy standards, different crash safety standards. So in all of our communications, we say vehicles, just in case we pick the wrong one that day. So that's why we do it. But it's interesting to know that people just say cars. And, we never, ever call an SUV a car because we're just ingrained not to do it. And that's a great example of us not knowing what the hell we're doing sometimes and not listening to the consumer. So I like that insight. Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How do you have notes in the I haven't had dinner with Terry last night. He didn't tell me a single question for today. I'm hearing him the same time. Michael has notes, and I think he has the questions. What is going on?
So these questions are not related, these notes are not related to his questions because I know those answers. These notes are related to any other dang thing you might ask me. So it's just in case.
He's prepped. One of the things.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, we're at a point where today we've heard a lot of conversation about electrification and the benefits of EVs. We launched a campaign, a digital campaign that said, buying an internal combustion engine vehicle in 2022 is like buying a flip phone. And so the idea is we know that the modes of transportation are better. We know that they're better for the environment. We know that they're going to create any number of jobs. We know all of these positive things. What are some of the challenges that you all think are inherent that we need to begin to address as we begin to tackle this?
So if we think about this from a retail side, if we think of car dealers, they have to balance out their showroom for the next 5 years. And you're absolutely right. Every time almost everybody gets into an EV, they never get out. It's clearly, if you are inventing both of them today and putting them on the floor and saying, which one should we develop? It's the electric one. You know, the whole idea of carrying liquid and then pouring it in and, you know, setting fire to it, none of that works anymore. So we know it's the better mode of transport. We understand that. But people are ingrained. So now if you're a dealer, you have to think about the next 5 years, how many ICE vehicles, how many gas vehicles you're going to order, how many electric vehicles you're going to order, where you're going to make your money, because you make money in different places on both sets of vehicles. And then the used car prices, you all know what's happened to used car prices now because of the chip shortage. If you can no longer buy a new gas vehicle, what do you think that's going to do to the used car prices of gas vehicles for the people that still want them? So maybe you'll want to go and buy 10 A4s and stick them in a garage for 5 years and then sell them as used cars when there are none left, because there's going to be somebody who wants to buy those. So clearly, the better thing to do and the better experience and the better everything is an EV. We just have to make sure that the market doesn't get too disrupted as we go through this change. And there is a point right now that I want to buy a gas vehicle before they all go. But then there's going to be another point that says, I'm not buying a gas vehicle because my trade-in will be lousy in 3 years' time because no one wants it anymore. So that's a really difficult moment.
You know, as far as barriers, I think leading with, in my opinion, the number one barrier to consumer adoption is at the widely different experience at the point of sale, the dealership. And that's why, and so what inspired the buyer's guide was we talked to someone, she wrote a blog on it, and her title was, I tried to buy an EV in Austin and I couldn't. And I took every lesson she listed out to heart. If you go to a traditional dealership and you go past a wall of trucks and you go in and you randomly whose turn it is to get service the next person walking in that door and say, I'm interested in test riding your EV, we found widely different experiences with a heavy weighting to negative on that critical point of sale. So what the buyer's guide does kind of mimics more of a Tesla experience. It allows you to see everything online, get all the information. So another barrier, talking to dealerships, and the buyer's guide is with collaboration with dealerships, because at the end of the day, they want to get units out the door as quickly as possible. But they were finding to sell an EV takes an hour and 50 minutes, to sell gas cars 40 minutes. And for various reasons, typically how MSRP works and discounts, they would get half the commission. So it would take twice as long, half the commission, and not even a better chance of making the sale. So you're doing what's called in the sales business, asking a salesperson to do an unnatural act. So of course they are going to guide you to, I want that quick sell, or the one they think they feel more comfortable in, or if you're waffling a bit, they sense it. You might have seen a gentleman walking around here with a glittery blazer, Buzz. Talk to him. He has probably sold more EVs in the state of Texas as a salesperson than anyone else in the state of Texas. His numbers were through the roof. And we worked with him on developing the buyer's guide and how to sell EVs. And we learned a lot from that discussion. Other barriers, you know, this whole, if I hear the term chicken or the egg one more time, first of all, the science is the egg came first. Chickens don't pop out of air, the egg came first. But it's always being referred to as infrastructure versus cars, all right? They don't have to be first. There can be parallel growth at the same time. And I hear so much importance on the public infrastructure, but let me tell you about the secret about public, the secret not so secret. 85% of all EV charging today happens at home. It happens at home, and a lot of buyers, they treat it just like their phone. It's not a matter of time and waiting. Is they go home, they plug in their car, they plug in their phone, they wake up, and it's in. So one of the best answers I've heard from a customer to talk about how long does it take to charge your EV is like about 10 seconds. You know, that's how long it takes me to, and then he doesn't think about it. And so you have things like range anxiety and whatnot. That's a phenomenon usually the 2 weeks before they own the car, or before they own the car, but within 2 weeks after. That is a symptom of pre-owners or brand new owners, because they figure it out very quickly. But bottom line, there's a lot of barriers, and I would encourage everyone to just collaborate. Everything we do is with collaboration partners. You know, we work with Matt, who was here earlier, CEO of Chargeway, to help with the education in dealerships. We work with a lot of partnerships as a way to just, you know, solve the problem.
I have a question on that. I know the chicken doesn't pop from thin air. Where does the egg pop from? And
Well,
it's a
so
chicken.
when a male chicken and a female chicken have a
Love each other
relationship, they do a special hug, Michael, and out of that special hug comes a fertilized egg, is how it's been explained to me. And then the egg is what then generates that out, then comes the chicken.
Let's took a turn.
So you
Well-
might have mom might be 80% chicken DNA, and dad might be 70%, and then baby chicken now might be 100%.
Took a turn.
These two. So, I think that is, concludes our panel. I think we're at time. But thank you for your time and your insight. I think it's really helpful for folks to begin to think about what the role of utilities are, what the role of OEMs and manufacturing is going to be, as well as other parts of the ecosystem. But I think it's really going to be critical for the two sectors to really begin to look at how we're going to accelerate this EV adoption, how we're going to get consumers engaged in these conversations and engaged into these vehicles and making purchases.
In summary here, I grew up with an Irish family, and you would ask the question in the morning, is it going to be sunny today, rainy today, windy today, hailstorms or snow? And they would say yes, because you get all that in a day. And I think we're just heading into that. Every possible way this industry could change is possible right now. So it's incredibly difficult to be able to pick out all of those variables and say, okay, the industry's going this way. We're sort of getting the sense of it, but we also know that there are so many external factors coming in. That's why we like the government to step in sometimes and say, here's some money for infrastructure, because we kind of need it. That's the chicken and egg thing on this one.
Well, sounds good. We're going to now close this panel and transition into our final keynote.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Enjoy Austin.